On today's Locked On Bucks, they get back in the win column. The Bucks do. Camille and I recap a win in Los Angeles, the role players that stood out, the reemergence, perhaps, of another role player, and the Bucks look to keep things rolling Saturday night in Sacramento. We dig into all of it after this.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for checking out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. Still time to sign up for free at lockedondaily.com and get your day started with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, as right now new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Back in the win column, Camille, and it comes 24 hours after the Pistons win on that Cade Cunningham banked in three, and the Indiana Pacers. I am just asking for one Pacers opponent to close them out. The Pacers win another tight one and shorthanded, but the Pacers keep winning. So you're still a full game back of the Indiana Pacers. And I mean, that's the big part is, look, if you lost this game, you're down to sixth and you're a full game and a half back of the Pacers, a half game back of the Pistons.
Yeah, it's important. Like, I know the Lakers were missing their top four players. They didn't have some key rotational players out there. So this is a game.
Camille, if you could name any player on the Lakers besides Bronny James, he was not playing in this one.
Exactly. So a lot of people looked at this one like, well, it's not really that big of a win because you're expected to win a game like this when the other team is that shorthanded. But to your point about the standings, like, these games are still important regardless of who laces up or suits up for the other team across from you. And on top of that, too, we just saw the Bucks lose to a Steph Curry-less team. We've seen teams throughout the NBA, not just this season, but just throughout the NBA. You go up against a shorthanded team, you might not have the right focus, and you lose those games. So the Bucks took care of business the way they needed to. A comfortable win for them after they got that first quarter lead going when they had the run to end the first, 25 run in the first quarter. And they were able to, the Lakers got to close down the stretch a few times, but were able to have a pretty comfortable win down the stretch. So it's a win that was needed, especially when you get the standings for this team, and also just morale, just kind of getting back on the right pace after dropping a few of their last games here.
The Pistons play tonight, taking on the Dallas Mavericks. So certainly going to be a challenge there. And the Pacers play tomorrow night. It's the second game of that baseball series with the Brooklyn Nets at home. Schedules for those two teams don't start to pick up until sometime next week. I know the Pacers have another game with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But, I mean, you look at how they beat them the last time. The Pistons do have a significantly much more difficult schedule the rest of the way. And, by the way, Camille, with another one of these games out of the way for the Bucks, they've gone from the fifth most challenging schedule remaining to now they have the 10th easiest schedule left in all of basketball.
I love that. I'll take it. I will take it. The Bucks need to try to rack these wins as many times as they can down the stretch here. So, I will take it. Sometimes you get a little luck along the way. Even with Sacramento coming up, Domantas Sabonis probably won't be lacing it up for him. So you catch another luck break on this West Coast trip for the Bucks. They weren't able to take advantage of it against the Warriors, dropping that game. And you heard the players say, we felt like we let that one go. That's one that we should have taken. We let that one go. And they came out with the focus that they needed against the Lakers. Now they need to carry that focus as the road trip continues when they hit the Sacramento, because they should be shorthanded as well. So just continue to stack those wins as you're going forward, and you can only play who's in front of you. And for the Bucks, listen, I am not going to begrudge the fact that they are getting some lucky breaks along the way here.
The Pacers have the Timberwolves and Lakers on the schedule next week. I believe it's another part of a back-to-back because, of course, it is. Why wouldn't every game the Lakers play from here on out be back-to-back games? But those are the challenges on next week's schedule. They still have the Oklahoma City Thunder. They still have the Denver Nuggets on the road. And they have their final three games of the season, home against the Cavs, in Orlando against the Magic, and that's a back-to-back. And then in Cleveland against the Cavs. It's you look at those Cavs games and think, well, there's the challenges, but Cleveland's going to have everything wrapped up by those two games. So it's going to be interesting to see who plays in those games. Pistons, much different story. That schedule gets significantly much more challenging. We can take a peek at that later on in the show, but we do have to talk a little bit about this game and the productivity we saw from a handful of players. Before we do dig into that, you mentioned the Bucks losing to the shorthanded Golden State Warriors a couple of nights ago, and that was one of the points that Doc made too about not just last night. He's talked about this a couple of times this season that, look, it's not as easy as this guy's out, we win. Like we more and more, and it's actually, depending on who you follow around the league, it's called the Doc Rivers rule of when guys are out, your team plays better and ends up winning. So he was certainly cognizant of that, but I don't know about you. When I saw Damian Lillard listed as questionable, and when Doc said he's probably out, but it's going to be a game time decision, in a strange sense, I felt like, all right, now they're going to win. And it's not like a shot at Damian Lillard. It just felt like, all right, this isn't like a Golden State situation all over again, or where you're the team of how did the Bucks lose to this team? I mean, you still have Giannis on the floor, but it just gave you this weird sense of relief of, okay, now I think they're going to win.
Hey, listen, I'm not mad at that feeling of it, because coming into it, after what we heard from the Warriors game, which was, Doc had the conversation with Dame and with Giannis, I was really looking to see just how the team responded after having those conversations, what the offense looked like. And for me, when I saw Dame was questionable, then Dame was out, I was like, guess we have to wait another game to see like if anything has really changed between, Giannis and Dame and how the offense is being ran. But to your point about the Doc Rivers rule, quote unquote, seeing that and knowing that the Bucks were coming off of a game where they felt disappointed in the outcome against the Warriors, I was pretty confident that they were going to come into LA and take care of business, especially when you look across from you. It's like, it's no Luka this time. Last time you saw the Lakers, they were shorthanded, and they were even more shorthanded this time around, because at least last time they had Luka. This time they did not. No Luka, no LeBron, no Austin Reeves, no Rui Hachimura, no Dorian Finney-Smith. Like they were missing a lot of key rotational players. And to the point of the Doc Rivers rule of like, hey, you can't, sometimes these teams win. At this point in the season, March NBA basketball can be really weird because of who's sitting, what teams are looking to play for. And there's so many conversations about the tank being on, so on and so forth for so many teams. But the guys who are hitting the court are playing for their livelihoods. Like they know, even if it's not going to be for this team, there's other people in the NBA watching. So like this is an audition for everyone. And the Lakers are in a really different position because they're one of the top teams in the West right now. They had a brutal schedule because of all the games they had to have rescheduled with the wildfires that happened in California. So like it was a tough spot for them to be in. But as we saw, like Bronny James, career high in points for him, like these guys were out there trying. But to see the Bucks execution being sharper, to see guys hitting shots, to see them taking care of business was a big win, just for, I think, the morale too in the locker room of like, hey, dust off what happened against the Warriors. We continue to push forward.
I do want to take a look at a couple of guys that really stood out in this one. Giannis obviously had a big game, but two guys in particular and what they brought, and actually a third that stood out for positive reasons for the Bucks in the win against the Lakers. And we'll get into that conversation and address some of the comments that we're starting to see come in here as we are live on YouTube this morning. So we'll get into the impact from a couple of starters, and a couple of bench players in this one, coming up next here on Locked On Bucks. Scaling your business requires the right expense at the right time, and with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top-tier freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring people simple and affordable. You can find the right talent if you need help with that marketing campaign, as Upwork connects you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Fast and easy hiring with Upwork. When you post a job, it's free and simple, and within a day, multiple qualified candidates are there to choose from. And instead of hiring full-time, Upwork finds affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. If you got your eye on a few underdogs this year, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. Tournament games happen almost every single day. There's always something exciting for you to find to bet on, and the app is simple to use. When you do win, you get paid instantly. No more waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So the guys that really stood out in this game last night, Camille, obviously Giannis had a big game for the Bucks, but this was also the second consecutive game Kyle Kuzma scored 20-plus points, and Gary Trent Jr. in his 27 minutes off the bench, almost a point per minute, scored 23 points. Every single shot he took was a three. He hit 6 of 10 on his threes, 2 more steals for Gary Trent Jr. Those 3 guys gave you everything you needed in this one. And look, we talked about the firepower that was not on the floor for the Bucks. I get that's a big piece of it, but still just the fact that, hey, this team won and 3-point shooting wasn't anything really major for the Bucks. I mean, they shot 31% from the outside, and you take Gary Trent Jr. out of the mix, the Bucks shot 20% on threes at 5 of 25.
Yeah, Gary Trent Jr.'s 3-point shooting really saved them there. Really got hot at the right time for this team, and they needed it. They needed it. Kyle Kuzma was one of those guys, as you mentioned, second straight game, at least 20 points. In the post game, he mentioned, like, I've been kind of playing on one leg over the last couple of weeks, and I'm starting to feel a bit better. And I thought that was pretty interesting to hear, because I've heard things, from different broadcasts of saying, like, hey, his conditioning, he had to get his conditioning up a little bit more to play for the Bucks rather than what he was doing with the Wizards, because his role on the Bucks is a bit more physically taxing, because he's being asked to pick up some of the other team's best offensive players. So on defense, he's exerting a lot of energy, and on offense, really trying to find his spot. Doc Rivers also mentioned that this is the first time in Kuz's career where he's playing with a stretch 5. So he has also been having to get used to when he should be cutting, because he's used more so than not, the 5 behind him is going to be the one taking those actions. So just continuing to get more comfortable with what his role is going to be for the Bucks. No turnovers for Kuz as well along the way. On technical foul this week, my co-host Eric, he asked, he's like, what is Kyle Kuzma's offensive game? Like, what spot on the court are you looking to try to get Kuz in? Because that's his shot. And I was like, that's a great question. And the Bucks have to do a better job of getting him easy looks. And I felt like against this Lakers team, which was undersized, Kuz decided, like, hey, I see an advantage here, going and use my size. The cutting, the finishing around the rim, the touch was a bit better for him. A couple like mid-post touches for him. But for the most part, around the rim for Kuz, and just kind of continuing to get used to where he likes the ball, where he's trying to score. I think it's going to be important for this Bucks team as they continue to figure out what this offense looks like. So an encouraging game from Kyle Kuzma along the way here, especially hearing that he feels as if he's getting healthier, which is really important down the stretch here.
Yeah, and we talked about it. I think much was made in the last couple of days, too, about the Doc Rivers meeting with Giannis and Dame following that loss to the Warriors. He talked a little bit about that before the game yesterday and said, we just kind of worked on our offense a little bit. There's things we see where guys aren't in the right spots. There's not enough movement. We're settling for good shots when a great shot or even better shot might exist there. And it's just one of those ruts that you have a tendency to get into over the course of the season, but quickly headed I didn't lose sleep over that. I didn't lose sleep over how our offense is performing or lose sleep over our defense. So he is giving the vibes of we're going to figure this out and we'll get better here. Lakers game is not really a barometer with the players that were off the floor, but just, getting back in the win column was the important part. One of the other names that I thought was really impactful for the Bucks was the guy that moved into the starting lineup in place of Damian Lillard in Ryan Rollins. And Camille, we've had the conversation a couple of times about the starting five and like, is this the right group for the Bucks to go forward with? And I think we have a tendency to oftentimes say, well, do you have to? Gary Trent is really the guy that we kind of fall back on a lot of. I know he's really found this role and this comfort with the bench, but maybe it is time to put him in the starting lineup. I know there are a few of the listeners and viewers and everydayers that have been quick to jump onto this name here, so we'll give credit there. But I am starting to come around on I don't know, is it actually Ryan Rollins that would make the most sense to be your two guard in some of these lineups and give you that defensive athleticism and ability, the wingspan, which I think is 6'11", 6'10" wingspan. He had 3 more steals last night. Doc talked about a little bit about what that brings to the team, but just another guy. I mean, Ryan's not a true point guard, but he can bring the ball up the floor. And the more we see teams pressuring Damian Lillard, the more I do think you need that outlet you need a second guy that's not just Giannis that can allow Dame to play off the ball a little bit more. And it kind of ties back to what Doc talked about with Ryan Rollins and that not just the 3 steals, but his ability to pressure the basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Doc said last night, I thought he was spectacular in the first half. Second half struggled a little bit getting caught under screens, but he pressures the ball, and ball pressure does big things for you when your opposing offense is starting things out and getting into their sets with 17, 18, 16 seconds on the clock. That changes things in how you perform in the half court, and that's one of the things that Ryan Rollins brings to the table for this group. So it was one of those things you watch and here's who was off the floor for the Lakers, but still, I'm curious to see this thing, and let's file this away and see, do we eventually in the next handful of games here get to the point of, depending on the matchup, I'd really like to see Ryan Rollins starting next to Damian Lillard.
It makes some sense. It checks the boxes that we've talked about we think is needed in that starting lineup, which is having that secondary playmaker, secondary guard who can bring the ball up and allow Dame to play a little bit more off ball. Because, when you look at why teams are pressing the Bucks and what that does to the Bucks offense, when you're being pressed full court, it takes you longer to get the ball over half court. It takes you longer to get into your offensive action. So instead of you starting your actions, with 20 seconds on the shot clock, you're getting into your actions with 16, 15 seconds on the shot clock. You're not able to go through as many actions. If the ball ends up in somebody's hands with 5 seconds left, now it's like, okay, whoever tried to make something happen out of it. So you're putting your offense at a disadvantage when you have less time to initiate your offense. And seeing Ryan Rollins be able to do that to other opposing teams where it's like, we're not the only ones who have to sit here and deal with having a shorter shot clock to initiate our offense. It's a talent. It's a talent what he can do on defense, and just being able to be that release valve on offense if teams are pressing Dame, it works. It's an option. It's an option. That's why the names that keep being thrown out about who it could be, they all kind of fit in. I can take the ball for a little bit and I can continue moving. I can continue going, then we get the ball back to Dame and initiate the offense. But Kevin Porter Jr., Gary Trent Jr., Ryan Rollins, just the other guards on this team, they're viable options, which, again, looking at this team compared to last year, I know this year's Bucks team, the only thing they've been consistent at for the most part is being consistently inconsistent, but they have more options this year than what they had last year of how you can try to overcome some of the things that you're seeing opposing defenses do. And Rollins is somebody who he slumped a little bit after getting some playing time there, which opened the door for, another young guard, Kevin Porter Jr., to kind of come in and take those minutes. But that's the beauty, I think, of the roster and having the young guys that they do have, because it's a competition for the minutes. You go out there and you produce, you're going to be able to get some more of those minutes. If you can't produce, well, we might look down this bench and see who else can come out here and do something with those minutes. So I wouldn't be mad at it if it's Ryan Rollins. I just think that something needs to happen in those games with Dame. If it's Rollins, if it's Trent, if it's Porter, like it just something needs to happen to kind of try to alleviate and have that safety valve for Dame when he is in the game.
Yeah, and I like the roles of Trent and Kevin Porter Jr. coming off the bench and knowing like this is the pot. Like Kevin Porter Jr. is the guy that comes in to spell Dame and run the offense. I'm not saying you can't play him with Dame, but you have that outlet. Gary Trent Jr., we talked about the comfort that he's found in that role on the second unit as well. I just don't really want to mess with that. And that's why I keep kind of drifting back to Ryan Rollins and wondering, is this the move that would make the most sense for the Bucks? AJ Green's another name that's come up a bit. Our friend Van tossed me some numbers when we were talking about some of the splits that we've seen from AJ and said, yeah, I thought the same thing. And then I dug into it and found this. So we'll get into that conversation, take a look at the Pistons schedule as well, and set our sights on the Sacramento Kings, as that's what's up next for the Bucks. We'll get into that coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on all of us again, and if you're feeling that last hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more than time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. You've been staying up late watching not just tournament action, West Coast Bucks games. 5 Hour Energy is what helps power you through the next day. With longer days, we all love to get outside. Maybe it's for a hike, a run, just an outdoor activity. That tropical burst flavor is that quick go-to to help give you that boost and get you through that outdoor activity. And whether you're at a game or traveling, 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps you feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack and get it delivered directly to your door. If you need one now, grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up and stay energized with 5 Hour Energy.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, Camille. Let's take a quick peek, and then we can get to some of the comments here of this, the Pistons schedule. They have 12 games left, and 9 are against playoff teams or potential playoff teams. The first of those is the Dallas Mavericks, who, I mean, we have to lump in to potential playoff team. They're tied with the Phoenix Suns for the last play-in spot. So the Pistons and Bucks are going to have a lot to say in who makes, and the Pacers for that matter, and who makes that final 10 spot in the Western Conference. But they're close to the season. So they get the Mavs tonight. Then they have the Pelicans and Spurs both at home. After that, the close to the season only includes one team that is out of the playoffs, and that's on the road in Toronto. They have the Cleveland Cavaliers at home next Friday, in Minnesota 2 days after that, in Oklahoma City, Memphis Grizzlies at home, Kings at home. And their final 3 games of the regular season are home against the Knicks, home against the Bucks, in Milwaukee against the Bucks. That by far is the most challenging close to a season for those 3 teams that we've focused in on, in the Bucks, the Pacers, and the Pistons.
Yeah, it is, and I'll be curious to see what the Thunder and the Cavs are doing at that time in regards like, they have everything sold up for them, so, like, I'm curious to see if they'll be actually playing their stars in that game against the Pistons, but as we have had the conversation, some of these teams are deep, and you can't overlook them just because some of the stars are sitting, but for the Pistons, again, we've kind of highlighted, like, as the season went on, like, "Hey, those last 2 games of the year, the home and away against the Pistons could end up being a really big deal for this Bucks team with the way the Pistons are playing, with how the Bucks have been playing. And as we continue marching closer to those dates, I feel like it's becoming a little bit bigger and bigger along the way here, especially with how close things are in the standings right now between these two teams with the Pacers as well. So it's going to be a tough finish to the season for the Pistons, which for Bucks, that's a good thing. You want to see that level of difficulty a bit higher for the other teams around you. But along the way, it's like the Bucks are going to have to continue to take care of business too. Like, it's really good to be aware of what the other teams around you have to do. It's good to keep scoreboard watching a bit too of like, hey, they lost this game. We move up in the standings. Hey, we're a game above, we're half a game, whatever it might be. But ultimately, like, the Bucks team just has to continue to try to take care of business themselves, because if they're losing games along the way, like, it doesn't really matter what the Pistons, like, you have to continue to win these games here. But a benefit for the Bucks here, again, as you have pointed out, like, their road's a little bit less difficult than what the Pistons have in front of them, which, again, you take that every single day.
Less difficult, we think, is the
That
caveat
part.
that we should add there. As for the Pacers, you look at what they've done since those 2 games in 3 days against the Bucks. Overall, this Indiana team's won 5 of their last 6 games, the lone loss being to the Bucks, and they've played 3 straight games now without Tyrese Halliburton. Curious to see if that becomes 4 straight tomorrow when they take on the Nets in the afternoon. But they beat the Dallas Mavericks in the Minnesota Timberwolves in that overtime win. 2 of these last 3 wins go in overtime, where Obi Toppin hits that heavily contested corner 3. That, if you're watching along as a Bucks fan, felt like a gut punch. But I mentioned Halliburton's been out. That game against the Timberwolves, Halliburton was out, Aaron Nesmith was out, Pascal Siakam was out, Miles Turner was out. So they were down basically everyone and won. The Mavs, Dallas continuing to play very shorthanded with just 8 active players. They win that one in a close one. And then they beat the Brooklyn Nets in overtime. I mean, all 3 of these wins, all 5 of these wins on this 5 of 6 run that we're talking about have been clutch games for the Indiana Pacers. And I think we saw something pop up in the comments, and it's getting harder and harder to disagree. It's starting to look like the Pacers from last year, how that team was really starting to put it together. They were not there earlier this season, and I think there was a lot of vibes of, well, I guess this is just a new version of Atlanta Hawks, where you catch some breaks, you get to the conference finals, and then it's not the same. But it does appear, this is looking like it's the same.
Yeah, you can't sleep on the Pacers. You can't sleep on the Pacers. And a barometer for them throughout the season has been Tyrese Halliburton's play, because part of the reason that they got off to the slow start is that he didn't look like the guy that he was last year early on in the season. And as the year has gone on, he's gotten a bit more comfortable. You've seen them take off. And now they're at a point, too, where, you have Nembhard, you have Nesmith, you have Siakam, who's been playing well as well for the Pacers. And these guys are picking it up. They're understanding, like, we're getting closer to the playoff march. And this is a team now that has some playoff experience after what they went through last year. So they understand of when they need to start turning it up. You cannot overlook the Pacers. All that being said, Justin, that is, if I could pick the first round matchup for the Bucks, it would still be the Pacers. In part, I like the fact that there's a rivalry developing between the two teams. And if the Bucks are healthy, I do think that they can beat that Pacers team in the first round. And ultimately, I want the Bucks out the first round this year. And I think they could against the Pacers. It'll be a tough series. I don't want anybody to get me wrong of thinking I'm like, oh yeah, the Bucks gonna sweep or whatever the case may be if that's the series. But I like the Bucks' chances against the Pacers. That's a matchup I would love to see. The Pistons is one that's kind of interesting to me because they're the young Bucks.
You're more concerned with the Pistons than the Pacers?
Oh no, I'm not more concerned. It's just I want the storyline, Justin. I want the revenge. I want the revenge.
Well, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get that. Camille, remains to be seen if we get the revenge. But look, what the Pistons have been doing, remarkable. Like they're going to triple their win total from a season ago, and I do believe before the season, when we have to revisit this, but when we drafted our teams that we predicted would outperform their win total. I don't remember which of the three of us, you, me, or Frank, got the Pistons, but I do remember you and I talking about I think the Pistons are going to be a play-in team, and they've exceeded those expectations. I mean, they won 14 games last year. They're already up to 39 wins. So it's been a remarkable job by JB Bickerstaff. Obviously, the changes they made to personnel as well. But East is in an interesting spot where we know who 1, 2, and 3 are going to be in that order. Pacers are just 3 games back of, I mean, we can stop and should have weeks ago having the conversation about can the Bucks get the 3 seed? They can't. With 13 games left, you need to outplay the Knicks by 5 games. It's just not enough time. The Pacers are 3 back, but they don't have the tiebreaker against the Knicks either. So pretty similar story. You got to outplay the Knicks by 4 games with 13 games remaining. So I think it's pretty clear. Cavs are 1, Celtics are 2, Knicks are 3. 4, 5, and 6 is the order to be determined. And then I also think it's pretty clear the Hawks are going to be either 7 or 8. And I think the Heat are going to be 10. It's just, do the Bulls catch the Magic, or do the Magic slide down to where the Bulls are? That's the only real question about the play-in tournament in the East.
Yeah, it seems like the 10 teams in the East that are going to make up the playoff / playing field are set. It's just that we're still trying to determine what the standings and the order will be for those teams. The Hawks, I mean, you look at the 4 teams that are currently in the play-in teams, they all have negative net ratings. They're all kind of like those annoying teams that possibly can give you some trouble. But I mean, the Miami Heat have been on a huge slump. I'm not sure if there are Bucks fans who are finding joy in watching what's happening to the Miami Heat right now, because they have just not looked good. But I don't think that even with that, they're in any real shot of falling out of the play-in, because the teams behind the Heat
there's 6 up in the loss column.
Yeah, like the other teams behind them too also don't really want to be in that position as a play-in team. So it feels like the 10 teams that are going to make up that Eastern Conference playoff field are set, and it's just figuring out that order. So down the stretch here between 4, 5, and 6, where most Bucks fans are going to be paying their attention to, because that's where the Bucks lie. Like, listen, it's all open. So it's like from night to night, have to keep an eye on the standings to see where each of these teams are. And with every Bucks win, just hoping that, the Pacers and the Pistons are losing along the way.
It does kind of feel like the Heat may be quiet quitting, but it was too late. And like, well, you're not going to catch Brooklyn or Toronto or Philly, because this is the first 9-game losing streak under Eric Spoelstra.
Like ever.
It has not, and the way they lost to the Pistons too on that banked in Cade Cunningham 3, so it's been tough for Heat fans. I don't think you're going to find anybody in Wisconsin that has any sympathy for them, though. But yeah, we're going to continue to keep our eye on the scoreboard go forward here. Again, the only game of significance for the Bucks tonight in the NBA is in Dallas. It's a 7:30 tip. And I understand there's a lot going on around that time, in that time window later on today with other basketball teams. But 7:30, the Pistons are in Dallas to take on the Mavericks. And then tomorrow, you'll know before you play that game against the Sacramento Kings, do you have a chance to move back in front of the Indiana Pacers? Did they somehow lose to the Brooklyn Nets? Or is it the same thing of got to win to keep pace with this team? Pacers on Monday have the Minnesota Timberwolves. Same story. You tip off 2 hours later in Phoenix, so you'll have a pretty good idea then. So the Bucks and Pacers are kind of lined up here in terms of their schedule days. Wednesday, Pacers play the Lakers. you're in Denver against the Nuggets. They do have a back-to-back the following day, and that following or the day after, you play the Knicks, and the Pistons have the Cavs. So that's when the schedule starts to pick up, and we're going to continue to keep our eye on that one. Real quick here, a couple other things I wanted to get to that we saw popping up in the comments. We're seeing more and more of, hey, why didn't Andre Jackson Jr. play? Get more minutes for Ajax. We talked about this after the deadline. The Bucks brought in guys that right now are better fits in offense and defense, in two-way players. There's no disputing Andre Jackson's defense. He's got to be a viable offensive option.
Mm-hmm.
And especially now that we're, having Doc Rivers meeting with Giannis and Dame to talk through the offense and continuing to pour over, man, offense is still 30th in the fourth quarter. It's still middle of the pack for a season as a whole. Like, now is not the time that you can really afford to say, well, let's take something that was already good and try to make it even better at the risk of sacrificing something that really needs to improve.
Yeah, it's the problem with the Bucks right now is their offense over their defense. And Andre Jackson Jr. is somebody who continues to help defensively. I don't think that him not getting playing time is an indication of like the Bucks are over Andre Jackson Jr. I've said for the last month or so now that I feel like this offseason is going to be really, really big for Andre Jackson Jr. and his development going forward, because he has shown that he can really pressure other teams' offensive players. He can be a pest on defense. He's done a better job of not fouling as much this season as we saw him do last season. So like there has been some progress in his defensive game, but offensively, he just has to continue to work at being aggressive when he does have the ball in a position to score. Like we've seen him pass up layups, just use athleticism and get to the bucket. So I think for him, this is going to be a big offseason for Andre Jackson Jr. and his development going forward, because I think he's a useful NBA player. He can be a very useful NBA player. It's just that Doc likes a 9-man rotation. And right now, some of the other guard wing options that the Bucks have are just higher up on that pecking order right now than Andre Jackson Jr. is, with Gary Trent Jr., with Kevin Porter Jr., with AJ Green, Taurean Prince. Like those guys are just above him right now in the rotation. And again, very useful player, I think Andre Jackson Jr. is, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he continues to develop. But right now, there's other guys who've earned those minutes, and I can see him being used as like that defensive spark if they need it every so often.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll mention this too, and I agree that this summer is big for Andre Jackson Jr. to figure out what is your role offensively, not just on the coaching staff as well. Like, how do we develop this and find this is who he's going to be as an offensive player? This is how we're going to make it work and fit him in around these guys. This one was interesting too from Van, not that Van, but talking about where the Bucks were in their clutch numbers last year versus where they currently are. They were not the best clutch offense under Griff. I think they were 5th. They were pretty similar defensively. I think they were 5th in offense, 3rd in defense. And those numbers did plummet after a coaching change was made. I think in the games played under Doc, the Bucks were somewhere around 10th in offense, and they were in the bottom 10, close to the bottom 5 in defense in clutch moments.
Mm-hmm.
The tricky thing with that is it was a much different schedule. So I don't know how much of that was dependent on the Bucks playing the easiest schedule in the league at those that 30-13 mark in those first 43 games. But I don't know that you can totally dismiss it either when you see we've seen a lot of the same trends so far this year. So that is certainly something to file away and keep an eye on. I just, it's not as simple as, well, it was this under Griff and now it's this under Doc. Like there are other variables in play, but it is something that needs to be figured out here for this Bucks team. And, speaking of Van, I mentioned too, he sent me some numbers when we were having the conversation about AJ Green and his performance. And the shooting splits are pretty similar pre-All-Star break versus post-All-Star break, but he had that one game against the Dallas Mavericks where I think he had 6 threes. If you take that out of the mix, I think it was 32% that he's shooting on threes in the second half schedule, which kind of lines up more closely with the eye test of what we had said.
Yeah, that does make a little bit more sense there. It's like that one game is helping to prop up those shooting numbers because he was able to get up a lot of attempts and he knocked down a lot of them along the way. That can definitely do it. So definitely something to keep an eye on going forward for AJ Green. And to the point about the difference in the Bucks offense this season with Doc or just under Doc and with Griff, the other thing I would add to that, in addition to under Griff, the Bucks having a far easier schedule, they didn't also have a lot of injuries during that time as well. Chris Middleton was healthy during that time when Doc came in. Some of the injuries started where you just didn't get to see that big three of Chris and Dame and Giannis playing together consistently, which also kind of tanked the offense a little bit down the stretch there. And then this season, again, better, it feels like chemistry between Dame and Giannis, but something still just isn't quite clicking along the way for him. And we heard under Griff, the Bucks were kind of like, a lot of it was just us on the court of, hey, we want to run it this way. We're going to do it. It was like the talent was like, this situation is what we're going to do. And maybe they just kind of need to get back into the feel of things. Like we've heard Doc talk about in practice, when they do get a chance to practice and walkthroughs, they're working on just spacing and like, okay, make sure that you're here, understand how the spacing needs to work out. So it's not 1-to-1, but I do think that there is a level of concern that should be here. Why the Bucks offense tanks so much in clutch time with Dame and Giannis being on this team and when they're available to.
Yeah, it was February 6th last year that Chris Middleton goes down with that ankle injury. And from there, he didn't return until mid-March. I think it was he went down against the Suns and came back for that game against the Suns. And you had him, for the most part, only 1 or 2 games that he missed after that return. But shortly thereafter was when Giannis goes down for the remainder of the season, as it would prove to be. So injury is certainly a big part of it last year. And that's the last thing as we start to wrap here, Camille. I talked about this on the radio show too, and we've talked about it in this setting before. But looking at the Bucks roster construction, to me, is games like last night when we talked about the impact you got from players like a Gary Trent and Ryan Rollins. I mean, I keep going back to what that bench was last year down the stretch and in the playoffs, where Malik Beasley was moved out of the starting lineup onto the bench. Pat Beverly was playing high 30s minutes for you. Pat Connaughton was consistently 20, 25 to 30 minutes. Jay Crowder, we were on the last legs of Jay Crowder. You just look up and down the roster at guys that were playing down the stretch or saw minutes in the playoffs. Pat Beverly is out of the league. Danilo Gallinari is out of the league. Pat Connaughton is basically out of your rotation. Jay Crowder, for all intents and purposes, is out of the league. I know he's on the Sacramento Kings. He didn't join them until December. And ironically enough, he has not played in a game since the last time the Bucks played the Sacramento Kings back in January. So that was your bench or heavy contributors, guys that were clearly on their last legs and no longer in the league. And you look at Pat Connaughton is still here, but not in the rotation. AJ Green was sparsely playing a year ago. He's getting more minutes. That's another big thing that you feel good about with this second unit. Not that it means, hey, the Bucks are clearly going to go to the conference finals, but your depth and the ability to play different ways, it's markedly improved and much, much different. It's like the football analogy where you talk about a certain running back and like, you need 4 yards. You need 5 yards. I'm going to give you 4. Great. You need 3 yards. I'm going to give you 4. Like that was the Bucks bench a year ago. Well, this is all we can do. So don't expect otherwise.
That's a great analogy to sum up how it went last year for this team. So it just comes down to being able to pull the right levers when you need them with the roster and getting the right rotations in depending on what the matchup calls for. So again, like down the stretch here, the Bucks are continue to tighten up, and we'll keep in mind too that this stretch of games that the Bucks have been playing since All-Star break has been without Bobby Portis too. So when we get to the last 4 games of the season and really trying to solidify what that playoff rotation might look like, it's going to be interesting to see just what combinations are being tried at the end of the season before you get into the playoffs here, because you got to reintroduce Bobby Portis, who's been a key rotational piece along the way as well.
Yeah, that's now the next most interesting thing to monitor here is what happens when this team does start to get healthy in those different ways that they can play. But tomorrow night, the Bucks head to Sacramento to take on the Kings. And then it's starting to get to the end of the line on this road trip here. I mean, 3-2 has to be the expectation.
Yep.
And last night, man, okay, that's still on the table. Kings is a gettable game. Phoenix Suns is a gettable game. Put yourself in the spot where, hey, can we go 4-1 on this road trip going into the Denver game? And I think we'll all feel much, much better about where things are starting to head here for the Bucks. Leave your thoughts in the comments too about what we discussed with Ryan Rollins. Is the starting lineup what it should be? What's the change that you would make? And we'll get into some of those thoughts on our next show here. Camille, there's one other thing that I had in mind, but it's more of a, once we get to the playoffs and end of the season, this is a discussion that I think is worth having. And it centers around sliding doors and head coaches for this Bucks team and within their division specifically. So keep that filed away, and we'll have that conversation when we have to have it. But that'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again next week on Locked On Bucks.